welcome back to Change the Odds, a podcast where marriage and family were never meant to be a game of chance. Blaine and Adrian, here we are. We're back. And once again, just like last week, my friend, clinical psychologist, Dr. Barbara Wilson. Welcome back.
Great to be here.
Here we are.
Yes.
All right, so we're wrapping up Becoming Friends, Partners, and Lovers, available on Amazon, where all fine books are sold. Also, you can go to changetheodds.com. All these videos, all these resources. So churches are using this for marriage mentoring. Small groups are using it. If you want to use it just as a couple, you can go watch the video, talk through the questions. Just a great way to kind of initiate some improvement of what's going on. But friends, partners, lovers. Blaine, we have made it to the fun section.
We did it.
Years ago, I had a friend who said, you know that book you wrote, Yada Yada Lovers? I'm like, yada yada the best part. So let's just do a quick review. Friendship now built on trust, partnership built on respect, now lover intimacy built on vulnerability. In the previous episode, if you haven't watched it, go watch it. We talk about intimacy outside the bedroom, foundational, what's going on. Matter of fact, Gottman says that to him, the greatest indicator of sexual intimacy is actually how often a couple cuddles. That if your relationship is generally healthy, now all these episodes, specifically this one, there needs to be a caveat. If there is active addiction, abuse, or adultery, this is not your avenue. This is not the information for you. You need professional help. I'm not saying the relationship is done, but professionals need to assist you. But for everybody else, I can say that cuddling is this powerful thing that will help the intimacy that goes on inside the bedroom. Just the physical closeness, just the calmness that I think that can come from that. But where the heart of this talk, Barbara, that you gave last night kind of came from, and one of the reasons I invited you to join us was we have the assessment at changetheodds.com that thousands of people have taken. We've used it here specifically at the location that we're at Bayside. And what struck me was there's a very basic question on a scale of 1 to 5. How would you say, how meaningful is your sexual intimacy to your marriage? Pretty low bar, basic question. And what strikes me is that less than 50% of our couples would say that sex is meaningful. It's present. It's just not that good or meaningful.
Right.
Is that something you see across the board in clients that you see, or are we uniquely messed up here in this assessment?
Absolutely. As I was mentioning last night, a lot of the couples that come in for therapy for some other reason, I find out that their sexual intimacy is very almost non-existent or very, very little, like months or even years since they've been sexually intimate.
Wow.
Yeah. So
is that causation or correlation? Is that the cause of the trouble, or is that just correlated
I think it's
to
correlation. I think it's a combination of factors. So something has, interrupted maybe what started at the beginning. Good sexual intimacy, and something has come in to hinder that. And then they just go their separate ways. And, it's interesting, even scientifically, it's kind of that same concept that if you don't use it, you lose it. So the less you are sexually intimate, the less you actually want to be. So the less desire you have for each other.
Oh, wow.
So being more sexually intimate actually increases desire.
Yeah. So it's interesting. I mean, I read a study recently that only 15% of couples would say in some way that that sex is the key to the relationship. So 15% would credit sex as being their strength, but 70% blame sex for their problems. So it shows that sex is never the main thing that makes the couple happy. But it is the place that a couple will look at and say, this is the evidence that we're unhappy. But is it because that's just the barometer that that's where the underneath surface issues begin to express themselves?
I think so, just because it is so vulnerable. It is a very intimate and vulnerable place. So if they haven't learned to be vulnerable in other areas, then that area is going to suffer. And that's where you get fear of performance. We talked about orgasms last night. So if there's this pressure to always have an orgasm, or for men to perform, because I even see that with men who are, kind of shying away from sexual intimacy, but the fear of, the performance or that pressure. And so that, that can start, or there's other wounds in the relationship, betrayal, lies, addictions, and things like that. And it is kind of that first, I think it is kind of a barometer of how well you're doing. Not necessarily that the sex has to be great all the time, but if you're not willing to, if not able to be vulnerable in that area, it is kind of a good barometer. Yeah. As I mentioned last night, God gave a lot of reasons. There's a lot of reasons for sexual intimacy in marriage. And one of them is to create life and passion and fun in your marriage. But I do think it's the one area that the enemy loves to attack.
Blaine and Adrian, what's been for y'all? I mean, how long y'all been married?
I don't know.
Wow.
13 years.
13 years. There you go. What's been the most surprising thing that you can share on a public podcast? What's been the most surprising thing intimacy-wise that you don't know? You don't know about sex until you're in it and you're in the marriage, and then you're like, oh, I didn't. Because many couples, they just assume, oh, this is going to be easy.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. Like the passion is easy as you're dating and all those things. And then as you get into the relationship, they're like, oh, there actually is, this sometimes is a struggle.
I remember because we saved sex till after marriage. And so then I remember like the first time it happened, I was like, is this what is this? And then I remember going to a movie and there was like this passionate sex scene. I was like, it's a lie. It's not what it's really like.
This is not going to be fun.
No, because it was painful and it was just like very like just two bodies hitting, like not passionate, very functional. But I had a hard time being vulnerable. And so I can relate exactly to what you're saying. It took many years growing up in a very conservative home. And now it's like, okay, go get it done. And I'm like, I don't even know how.
Yeah.
Right.
So we've worked through that and we're doing great now. But
one thing that was
Was it painful for you, Blaine?
No.
It wasn't.
just like crying, like, why?
This is great. I don't know what you're talking about.
Well, that was a big tension for us.
Sure it was.
Yeah.
And it's good to like talk about how much work it takes currently still to this day.
A lot of practice.
And a lot of communicating and a lot of things like that. One thing that I recognize that I think would benefit a listener is when I am in the mode and I'm thinking this is the night and we're doing the thing and da-da-da-da-da, she is thinking about so many other things than this moment. And I'm like, only one thing. This is going to be wonderful for both of us. And she's like, oh, shoot, the kids got to do the thing tomorrow.
Got to make lunches in the morning.
What I discovered really helps both of us because it's very important for me that she's in the mode too. I don't want it to be serviceful or anything like that. I want it to be connection and that sort of thing. So, but by like taking care of the list of things that she has on her mind, okay, yeah, let's clean up the thing. Let's make the video for the Instagram. Let's do all of your things. How about now? Yeah, sure. Let's go. And it's very interesting to note that when her mind is cleaned out, it's far more fun if you're looking for the fun.
That's an interesting, I mean, I don't know if this is true in most couples or not, but I mean, I see it with me and Jenny in that it's not uncommon for the intimate moment's going to happen, right? Jenny needs to download the list first.
Yeah.
Like get in bed and, oh man, we got to do this.
Yeah.
And I'm like, wow, okay, I guess I need to go do that then.
Yeah.
Whereas I'm like, no, let's have intimacy. And then I'll do whatever
I'll do anything.
But that's typical male-female brains, right?
Yeah. I mean, I mentioned that, that women often need to be able to mentally prepare because they have so much going on.
Yeah.
If they're raising a family and if they're working, it's just nonstop remembering details, and they drop into bed at night exhausted, already thinking about the next day.
Yes.
So they do need some time, and that's where communicating. That's why I said to the guys, like, let us know, like, let's, some anticipation, like, allow the wife in that time, especially a busy wife, to prepare mentally.
Yeah. And another thing we've implemented is like, let's say he initiates and I'm like, I'm just so tired. Like, I mean, if it's for you, cool, but like, I can't be into it tonight. He'll be like, okay. Or I'll be like, I'll initiate within like the next 24 hours, or I know that it's like, okay, he's needing it, so I'm going to gear up for like tomorrow. And then he knows like, okay, it's not going to be like a week till we become intimate again. Great. So we started.
Where did you read that?
Yeah.
What book possibly
know.
has the
I think we made it up.
24-hour rule?
Oh, you have a 24, and I just said, offer an alternative, like tomorrow night.
And every couple can come up with their own thing. But in Friends, Partners, and Lovers, this is kind of actually one of the first things that kind of went viral for me years ago, is Jenny and I were trying to navigate that. Of obviously she has to have the ability to say no. I mean, clearly that's the case. But then it just creates this great drama, and especially in the guy's head many times of, well, when is it going to happen? Is it ever going to happen again?
Rejection.
Yeah. And so that idea was, look, if let's say it's scheduled for that night and you don't want it to happen, it doesn't happen. Just within the next 24 hours, at some point you initiate.
Yeah.
And that it just took all the pressure off of that.
It
Now,
takes-
for other couples, maybe it's 48 hours. The time doesn't matter.
You can agree on whatever the time frame
But
is.
the idea, friends, partners, and lovers, available on Amazon, 24-hour rule. That's where it is.
Yeah.
But hey, Barbara, it was a great talk last night. Very meaningful to people. And so I think our listeners are going to benefit greatly from it. So let's go inside the Worship Center at Bayside Granite Bay and hear Dr. Barbara Wilson talking about how to have meaningful sex.
I am Dr. Barbara Wilson. I'm a clinical psychologist. I'm an author, mainly writing about healing from your sexual past. I've been speaking and leading ministries here at Bayside for over 20 years, if you can believe it. And I really appreciated Kevin putting my very 20-year-old picture on the bulletin this week. I thanked him for that. So I'm also married to my college sweetheart. We'll be married 44 years in June. We have 7 adult children, 3 daughter-in-laws, and 7 grandkids. So we've got a lot. We've been through it all. We've got a lot under our belt. But sex wasn't always good for us. And that's what God used in my life to take me through some healing of my own from my own past. And that's what led to writing and speaking and helping others find healing as well. Now, just a little aside note to that, I've also traumatized all of my children, and you can be praying for them, because I started teaching sexual health, going into schools and youth groups and talking about, sexual health, saving sex for marriage. And so, of course, I went into all their youth groups and even their school classrooms, which I don't quite know if they've forgiven me for yet. But my youngest son, for sure, who has moved away, I'm sure he doesn't want to, he needs counseling, I'm sure. But I went into his 9th grade class here at Granite Bay. His teacher asked me to come in and do my curriculum. I used to write curriculum for high schools and colleges and things like that. And so I said, hey, Brian, I'm coming into your class. How do you feel? And he said, okay, well, that's okay, but just please don't tell anybody your last name. I don't want them to know you're my mom. I said, okay, fine. And he said, and please don't talk about anything that you and Dad do. That would be so gross. And I said, no problem there. And so I go in, it's a 90-minute class. He's sitting right here looking straight ahead, never looked at me once. And at the end, I left. I was coming back the next day, but he came home later after school and I said, so how did it go, Brian? He goes, well, it was going good. But then at the end of the class, one of the girls asked me, Brian, that kind of looked like your mom. Was that your mom? And I said, oh, no, I'm so sorry. What did you say? He said, well, I told her I've never seen that woman before in my life. So that's how he handles it. That's how we handle it in the Wilson family. Just avoid and ignore. But tonight I want to give you a couple points on how to build a healthy sex life in your marriage. First of all, sex is God's idea, and he says it's very good. And he created it for marriage for many reasons. He designed it also to get better and more fulfilling throughout your life together. I think that's why the enemy loves to use this area in our life to destroy us. First of all, I think he tempts us before we get married to have lots of sex because he knows that's going to impact our ability to bond and have a good sexual intimacy in marriage. But then also once we get married, he tempts us to stop having sex in marriage. And in your handout, I share 6 of the purposes or ways that God uses sex in marriage for our good. First of all, it's to create life. For intimacy, so that is that closeness, that intimate knowledge of each other, that two becoming one kind of intimacy. For protection against temptation, for bonding, which we'll talk a little bit about, for comfort, and for pleasure. Now, because of time, I really want to focus on 2 of those. And one of those, the first one is creating life, and the other one is bonding. So sex not only creates physical life, those little humans that then try to ruin your sex life, but sex also brings this intimate life into your marriage. Not only with passion and fun and friendship, but I believe God uses this as a way to breathe life and passion into your relationship. I find that most couples that come to my practice that are struggling and looking for marriage counseling, they come for a variety of reasons, maybe communication or some kind of conflict that they can't resolve. But what's always interesting to me is a lot of them are not having sex. And I believe that God uses the sexual intimacy to help keep our marriages alive and passionate long into that relationship. But God also created sex for bonding. So this two becoming one flesh kind of bond. And even chemically, as Kevin was mentioning, when we experience sexual arousal and orgasm in our marriages, we're releasing not only chemicals that create this attraction, kind of like it becomes something that we bond our brains to, that we are attracted to each other, and they're the only person that we have experienced that kind of pleasure with. But also we release oxytocin. Oxytocin is a bonding hormone that's only released in high levels in 3 times in a human when a woman gives birth, when a woman breastfeeds her baby, and it's also released in men and women during sexual arousal and release. And it's really a bonding hormone. And the interesting thing about oxytocin is that it helps create this stronger and stronger attachment within your relationship. And it creates that deepening of your love, where you get that love gets stronger and deeper with each other. The other exciting thing about oxytocin is it's what keeps the excitement of sex kind of alive longer with that same partner, basically until eventually the parts stop working. But you can't believe how long that continues to go on. That just is something that God created that doesn't end too quickly. So the reason I'm telling you this is because I talk to a lot of people who think that sex is really just primarily about the pleasure. And that is definitely one reason. But the benefits go beyond that momentary release that God uses to glue us or bond us together in a way that no other relationship does. So you've heard that marriage takes work, but sometimes sex can take work too, or can feel like work. But pushing through those feelings will be worth it. So in your handouts, I gave you some things that can hinder sex. We're not going to talk about all of those, but we will be talking about some. One is pornography, and whether on your own or during sex. Abuse in marriage, any kind of abuse, emotional neglect. Kevin has been talking a little bit about that, emotional intimacy, which is really important. Any kind of addictions, past abuse or trauma, past sexual partners that we might have created a bond to. Children, especially in those younger years, can make it challenging. Fatigue, busyness, medical issues. There's a variety of medical issues that can be hindrances to sex. There's painful intercourse at times for women, but all of these things can be treated. Hormonal changes, the dreaded menopause. I always find it interesting that the word men is in that word. And then also erectile dysfunction for men. Those are all things that can hinder sexual intimacy in marriage. But again, they are all treatable. And sometimes I find that it's just a little scary to go and talk to your doctor about some of the things that really you could find to be helpful for your intimacy in your marriage. And so don't be afraid to do that. So what I want to just kind of give you 3 kind of little tips, just for time, things that can help build a healthier sex life. First of all, keep it clean. So I'm not just talking about our bodies, but also our minds. So of course you want to be clean and have something that smells nice, but also we want to keep our minds just for each other. We want to keep our minds clean, which means no pornography. So I think pornography is one of the greatest evils in our whole, timeline of human history, just because of how it's impacted not only how we see each other, and how we view sex, but how we then become where we mistreat each other. And not only that, with pornography, we also start to create a bond to those images. We can actually train our brain to respond to pornography. Like, Pavlov, when he did the dog and the bell, we can actually start to train our brain to be aroused by that, which then can interfere with the enjoyment of each other. We actually start wanting those images or needing those images to create that, to release that same level of chemical in our brains that create that enjoyment for sex. And so I think God is pretty clear about sexual intimacy just being between a husband and wife and not including others and not including images. Recent, studies have shown that pornography is, in a marriage, can be one of the roots of many of the divorces. In fact, over 50% of divorces have pornography at its root. The other problem with pornography is we often can bring that into our relationship, or we're thinking about that during sex, and so we're not being present with our spouse. And then we might have to bring some of the things in to enhance our sexual intimacy because we can't be present with our spouse. I want to encourage you, if this is you, please seek professional help. Something like Celebrate Recovery for Addiction, because God has a plan to heal you. He doesn't want this as a part of your marriage. He wants to heal you, but you can't do this on your own. I talk a lot to young people, and I am concerned with their view of pornography, that it's not a big deal. They're not having sex with anyone. They're not going to hurt anyone. But I'm trying to teach them and train them that they are hurting their brains. They are starting to train their brains, and that will impact their future relationship. And my heart goes out, and God cares so much about this area, and it's everywhere now. It's so hard to not go to anything online, to not see something that draws you into that. And I just really encourage you to take that seriously. And if that's going on in your marriage, in your life, I encourage you that God can heal. Secondly, I encourage you to have it often and make it fun. So how do we do that? So we schedule date nights. I hope you're doing date nights, but it's also okay to schedule sex. Now, I know that sounds not very much fun, and I don't want to necessarily dish on spontaneity because that can be fun too. But life gets busy and things happen. So if something is important, we put it on the calendar. Scheduling can also build anticipation and help us prepare ourselves mentally. I think women especially, mentally, that helps us prepare. And it can add fun for both the husband and the wife. We plan for lots of things, parties, vacations, birthdays, and the planning can be part of the excitement, just like sex. The other thing is, have some variety. So, I think I called it, drive through, the quickies. There's the steady home cooked, the regular sex, and then there's romantic sex. And so those are the more gourmet, where you take a little bit extra time, and they're all good and okay. Take some turns each month planning something special, a special romantic sexual encounter, where you're doing something special, that it's not just about the sexual intimacy, but you're planning a date or you're planning something special that makes that a longer, more enjoyable experience where you're really becoming more intimate, sharing things. Also, frequency. Kevin talked a little bit about that, and I totally agree. Being more intimate, physically intimate outside of the bedroom can lead to more frequency inside the bedroom. So my recommendation, based on all of the things that we talked about, why God, created sex and the purpose for inside marriage, I think at least a minimum of one time a week is really important for that bonding, to feel close, for that protection, for that comfort, for all of those things that we talked about. I'd say a healthy marriage is having sex 2 to 3 times a week. Now, when I have couples come into my office, for those that aren't having sex at all, I say start with one time a week and maybe try scheduling it if that's helpful for you. If you're the one that likes to pass on sex, you're the one that's always wanting to say no, or you're trying to avoid it, you don't want to, you try to hide somewhere in the house when your husband or wife wants sex, try to say yes more than no. Think of the many reasons for sex if you need convincing. And if you do say no, offer an alternative, like how about tomorrow night? So, and the funny joke in our house is my husband says, my favorite night to have sex is tomorrow night. So, and that is not true. But also, guys, please use your words. We women cannot read minds. If you're cuddling with us, maybe you're just cuddling, or maybe you want sex. Which is it? Let us know. The other thing, start making love in the morning on your way out the door. This is one of the things that we do. And this is funny because my husband did say to me, you're not going to talk about anything we do, are you? Just like my son. It was just hilarious that he said the same thing. But so my husband will give me a little tap and a passionate kiss, and then he'll say, tonight, baby. And that works for us. I don't know if that would work for you, but then when we get home, he'll have my favorite takeout and drink waiting for me. And that is just builds some anticipation and excitement for us. If you've got young kids, you might want to have code names for that activity or time together that can protect your children from hearing anything that they shouldn't. Building anticipation for that sexual intimacy can also be such a great part of that emotional intimacy too, because you're learning to trust each other and you're preparing for something that is very special. Also, most men are aroused visually, and I'm obviously speaking generally, but in generally, most women are aroused more by touch and romance and words. And so just remember that. Next, explore those bodies. Discover new ways to arouse each other. It's not always about the grand finale. Get to know each other, take time to explore, enjoy. That is part of the intimacy. That is part of enjoying each other. It is part of that connection. Also, I love to recommend people try to connect 4 times a day with a hug, a kiss, a hello. First thing in the morning, when you wake up, when you leave for the day, when you return, and before you turn out the light. 4 times a day. Imagine if you just connected those 4 times a day and let your spouse know, I see you, I'm here for you, and you have those touches, you have those connections, eye-to-eye connections, you'll begin to start to feel more connected and more emotionally connected to each other and already starting to develop that intimacy. The other thing is go to bed together. I know that that's not always possible, but if you can, as much as you can, try to go to bed together. I think there's nothing that says more togetherness than using that time in the evening, even if you're just not falling asleep yet, but being in bed together, maybe it's just you're reading or you're talking, or having sex, but being together, going to bed together creates this kind of, I don't know, it feels safe, it feels nice. We're going to bed together. I realize that sometimes with some schedules that's not possible. I do hear a lot more of people sleeping in separate bedrooms and separate beds because of snoring, because of medical issues, and of course, those are all valid things to be in separate locations. But as much as you can, try to be in bed together. Try to go to bed together. I know that my husband and I, we have done that our whole married life, whenever we're home together. And it just becomes a wonderful connection time for both of us. So we talked about keeping it clean, making it frequent and making it fun. But first of all of these things that we've talked about really just depend upon my next point, and that is keeping it safe. Kevin talked a little bit about that, but I want to go on and talk about how do we keep our intimacy safe emotionally, physically, and sexually. So in therapy, we talk about being available with couples. Are you available to each other? Are you responsive to each other when we have needs? Are you emotionally engaged with your spouse? The acronym is ARER. Are you available? Are you responsive? And are you emotionally engaged? That's when we need each other. We reach over and we know our spouse is there for us. They're going to respond in a way that makes us feel safe and connected, and they're going to be emotionally engaged. There's a lot of things today that will inhibit that emotional engagement, and one of them is, of course, our phones, being on the internet, being on our phones. The phone, I think, is one of the biggest ways now that we can feel disconnected emotionally. And when your spouse is needing you, when you want to talk to them, when you have something important to say, you want to know that you can reach out to them and they're going to be there for you. They're going to be responsive to what you need, and they're going to engage you emotionally. Don't expect to ignore your spouse all day and then want to get it on that night. That's just not right, and it's not fair. Women especially need to feel emotionally safe and connected to be able to feel vulnerable for sex. And it's also why we like time to allow our minds to prepare for that. You know, working moms, they have a lot of things on their mind, and then they crash into bed at night, and the last thing on their mind is sex usually. They're probably thinking about what they also what they need to do tomorrow. Now the guys, you may have been thinking about sex since you got up that morning, and but you know, your wife has not been prepared, and that might be something that might be helpful. At least talk about, is that something that could be helpful, preparing your mentally and emotionally each other to enjoy sexual intimacy. We need to speak to and treat each other kindly. There's nothing that kills sex more than harsh, critical words. Also, honoring each other during sex and in the bedroom. If one says, hey, this is really not my thing, then we need to honor that. No pressure to do things that feel uncomfortable, that feel maybe degrading, and being able to talk about that. You know, it is interesting, I think, as couples, we're having sex, but it's very uncomfortable to talk about sex, even with couples. It's very uncomfortable to do that. And that's one of the things that we need to learn how to do more, being able to be comfortable talking about what feels good for us, what we don't like, and maybe some things that might be fun to add in that would not be, that the other person would feel okay with. And it's, sometimes we feel uncomfortable talking about that. And that is a really important way to begin. In fact, on your handout, I gave you a few questions to start talking about some of these things. How satisfied are you with your sexual intimacy? What are some things you think might be hindering that? And what are some things that would be helpful to be able to increase that or to improve that? The other one is learn each other's love language. You all know what the love languages are, right? And that's just really, really important to find out, how does your spouse feel loved? Is it with words of affirmation or gifts or physical touch, quality time? Those things, those are all important. These are conversations that we should be having and continuing to have. And finally, this is more my area where I have some expertise in, is, do you have past trauma? Sexual trauma, childhood sexual trauma? Has there been other sexual experiences that you have experienced or been exposed to that are impacting your ability to feel safe during sexual intimacy, even with your spouse? If that's true, then sex can feel dirty for you, or unpleasant, or painful. It can trigger negative memories of the past. Also, if you've had negative experiences in past relationships, you've had sex in past relationships, all of that you can bring into your marriage that can inhibit your ability to feel safe with your spouse, to feel that sex is safe, and to be able to enjoy it. And especially if there's been abuse in your past, it's very hard to want to be present because it can trigger a lot of negative, painful memories. Sometimes memories of even childhood abuse don't get triggered often until marriage or until you have a child. And so sometimes that sexual intimacy can be some of that trigger. And that can be really scary when you don't know what's going on. But I would encourage you to, if this is coming up for you, to address that and not just to keep going and pretend that it's not an issue. You're going to need healing to be able to rewire what the past has done to your brain. And if you're the spouse of this one, then being supportive and encouraging and safe, you're going to be able to help your spouse heal. Just a little personal, I know this was my challenge in my marriage, and we'd been married like 20 years, and I was still struggling with sexual intimacy, but I didn't know why. It wasn't really fun for me. And I couldn't talk about it with anyone because I thought I must be the only one. And my husband wasn't having a problem, just with me. And I couldn't figure out why until, God started leading me through healing, and I realized that my first sexual experience wasn't consensual. Although this was someone I was dating and I cared about, we were both Christians, and I was young. What happened was this person really forced himself on me, but I did not even realize that at the time. Not even for the next 20 years did I realize, until God began to take me through healing and show me that my issue with sexual intimacy had to do with that first experience. And that led to other choices that I needed also to heal from. But when I was willing to take that time and go through that really hard pain of going through that healing for that, God really healed that for me and really made the difference in our relationship. Not only just taking away that negative impact on my life, but also being able to change my brain about sexual intimacy and how God saw it, because I didn't see it as something that was really valuable in marriage. And that really changed for me, especially seeing God's plan for us. It's so amazing. Like, God is so amazing that He would give this type of sexual intimacy or intimacy in a marriage that really has a multi-purpose for us, not just pleasure, but just to create life in our marriage and to protect us from going outside of our marriage, to be a comfort for us, as well as this incredible attachment and bond that only gets stronger and stronger. And that's what God wants for us. He wants that intimacy and deepening of our love to grow and grow, because that's our testimony really to the world, that God is faithful and He's good, and He has created something that is so good. And your children, they need to know that God created something amazing for marriage, and your grandchildren. And so what you do in your life, the healing that you're willing to go through for yourself, you're going to pass on to your children, to your grandchildren. It's not just about you. There's a world that is very much hurting in this area of sexual intimacy, and they need to know that there is healing and there is hope. Before Kevin comes out, I want to talk about my books. Kevin sells more books than me, so I want to take this opportunity to promote my book. So I have a book for marriage. It's called Kiss Me Again, Restoring Lost Intimacy in Marriage. And I wrote this after taking a lot of women through healing for their past, and discovering that as women healed from their past, their marriages were improving, especially in their area of emotional and physical intimacy. And so this is great for couples if one or both of you have things that you have brought into your marriage from your past, whether your own choices, past relationships, sexual abuse, or trauma. This is a great book to be able to work through together. There's a study guide in the back that creates discussion where you can have opens up conversation, gives you things to talk about. This was my first book, The Invisible Bond, How to Break Free from Your Sexual Past. And this is good for men or women, but also young people. If you have teenagers in your house, that could be a good one, or a single friend. And also, this is a study I've written that I take women through. It's a very comprehensive 12-week study to help women heal from a variety of things in their past, including anything sexual. I also have one written for men. So you don't get away with that. You get to do that too, if that's something that has happened to you, because men have been sexually abused as young children too. It's becoming a greater and greater statistic, which I also believe pornography really fuels, the abuse of children and the abuse of children and women. So that's what I encourage you tonight. That's just a little snippet of how God wants to bless your marriages and bless your life with intimacy emotionally, and this physical intimacy that only is really blessed inside a marriage relationship. And God does want to bless that for each one of you.